morning, everyone, and welcome to the Black Creek Oyster Bay Service Committee meeting for Monday, June 5th, 2003. We have no one in the gallery today, but welcome all those that are watching on YouTube. There's not much to report except to kick it off with the recognition of the fact that we are doing our business today on the traditional unceded territory of the Comox First Nation. We're going to plunge right into this agenda, and I'm joined today by Director John Rice from Area D, who is a partner at this service. We're going to start off with the receiving the resolution report, item C, for a motion. Thank you very much. And seconded. Any discussion on the resolutions report? Which used to be the work plan, I think. No discussion. Okay, so on receipt, we did receipt, so we'll just receipt. We haven't received yet. So on receipt, call the question. All in favor, and that carries. Into reports. Black Creek Oyster Bay Comprehensive Rate Review Report, report from June 1st regarding an update on the proposed 2023 Comprehensive Water Rate Review process and a timetable is for receipt. If I get a motion.
Move receipt.
And seconded. So over to staff, over to our acting CAO, James Warren, for introductions of staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. I'm pleased to introduce Kaylee Liebert, engineering analyst. I'm hoping I said your last name correctly. And Kaylee will be presenting a PowerPoint and informing the directors about this report, and then staff are available for any questions that the directors may have. So over to Kaylee.
And who's the other beardless staff member there?
Well, that would be, I think that's Chris LaRose.
Oh, you're looking good.
Minus
Chris.
the beard.
Looking great. Okay. Go ahead.
Thanks, James, and through the chair, good morning. I've developed a brief PowerPoint to help walk through the staff report. So just a bit of background. Oops, sorry, we're just here we go. So just a bit of background. So in 2019, we completed asset management plans for the BCOB, Comox Valley, Royston Water Local Service areas. In 2020, we also, there was a Union Bay Improvement District infrastructure study completed. So we have a bunch of background information on our systems in terms of their age, construction. And then through 2020 and through 2022, we've experienced quite significant inflationary cost increases for cost of construction and materials especially. 2023, we're now kind of we're incorporating a lot of these main points of the asset management plans and kind of into this comprehensive rate review, and we'll be doing this across a number of services, including BCOB. So what is an asset management plan? It's comprehensive inventory of all assets for the water system, water mains, service connections, reservoirs, wells, etc. So everything that is kind of associated that has a cost, has a replacement value. And then it uses kind of best principles and industry numbers to kind of generate expected service life. And so it's a kind of a number of averages. Specific to the asset management plans, of which we only have most services, but not all. There's a strategic prioritization of replacement based off of condition, its criticality in terms of within the system and the risk of what could happen to this, like higher risk being those that are kind of strategic in the system. Sections of water mains that are higher risk than others. And to kind of prioritize the amount of to which water main should be replaced first. And so for BCOB, through this asset management plan in process, we've kind of determined, we've got 28 kilometers of asbestos cement AC pipe. It was largely constructed in the late 70s. And it has an estimated service life of 60 years, which puts us at the late 2030s for replacement of a good chunk of assets. Next slide. And this is what that replacement schedule looks like. It's quite, you can see quite clearly that a large component of that is right around 2040, when much of that system was constructed, or it was which is based off of when the construction period of around 1980 of many of the water mains. You can also see kind of other aspects of the system that kind of pop up, such as the storage tanks and treatment system as well. So current contributions to capital works reserve. So despite moderate rate increases to date, the services have only been collecting an average of 123,000 of reserves annually over the 2020 to 2023 period, far less than the recommended reinvestment rates shown. Reinvestment rates can be calculated in several ways. The range shown in table 1 above was calculated using current cost of construction for all existing infrastructure and calculating the 25 or 100-year average annual expenditures. That was based off the information in the previous slide. Looking at longer periods of average replacement values results in a lower average annual expenditures, but this is more reflective of a long-term sustainable rate. It's important to note that as the vast majority of the water system infrastructure was constructed at the same time or similar time, the recommended annual reinvestment rate will likely fall in the higher end of this range. This is what our initial work is showing, but we intend to spend the next several months looking at opportunities to reduce that financial impact on current users by assuming some borrowing and potentially grant funding for those future asset replacements. So yes, this is enter the 2023 comprehensive rate review. There is a certain level of risk if we don't collect adequate reserves. One of those being excessive future borrowing debt. Borrowing for infrastructure translates to roughly double the cost implications to residents, which provides a very significant incentive to collect as much reserves as possible. We are late implementing asset management. The transition to a healthy asset management system will take decades, and in the interim, we'll be incurring debt. But once fully implemented, our asset management system will result in no borrowing, which will translate to the lowest possible rates. Oh, sorry, a couple more bullets. Yeah, so another risk to the service, we can have sudden and significant unplanned rate increases if, say, we're doing a kind of emergency repairs, and there's also a kind of a risk of decreased level of service due to increased service disruptions as well. So in 2023, we'll be using the WaterWorks software and services. Software is able to quickly and reliably generate multiple scenarios to provide more certainty and detail on a more sustainable rate structure. And we'll be looking at a number of considerations and inputs into this rate review. I think one of the chief ones being the idea of steep versus gradual rate increases. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Is that better? Thank you. So we'll be looking at, and there's a number of things that we will be looking at for inputs into the rate review and also considerations. One of them being the idea of gradual rate increases over time versus a steep increase, but there are implications to that. We'll also be looking at asset replacement costs. Unit rate calculations is based primarily currently on what we've been seeing to date in terms of actual costs of construction as $1 per meter, and then incorporating that in terms of what it is that is in today's values and extrapolating with inflation in terms of kind of incorporating as we need to replace in the future years. We'll be looking at the the split between parcel and frontage tax and user rate. And there are kind of a lot of nuances in terms of how that split is how we ratio that split between those two. And then there's also reverse will be the CVRD will be looking at implementing reserve fund policies to kind of prevent the idea that that we need to have at least a certain contingent of reserves before and that's a key component in terms of the actual kind of projections. So as we, if in any particular year that we have a large construction period, we can't drain our reserves to a certain amount for emergency purposes. And then there's also impacts of community growth and water conservation. So if you have increase in user base, there's also kind of a commensurate amount of additional, you can expect increase in funding as well as the impacts of water conservation in terms of the decreased revenues incurred through water conservation initiatives. We'll also be looking at different scenarios in terms of grants and future borrowing as well. And then potentially also looking at implementing different rate structures according to sector, like residential versus commercial. We can also incorporate the projects that were highlighted in the water master plan, and there's also the projects that are currently within the 5-year financial plan. So at as last meeting, we introduced the water master plan, and in that we highlighted that about 12 kilometers of water main upgrades are currently being thought as to be upgraded in order to, but to be completed as replacements occur. This is quite significant, but we would be doing this over time. But we're also that we're conscious of the fact that we also have some additional work to. We consider the upsizing costs in the rate review with the understanding that they might be further reduced through follow-up work confirming system fire flow requirements. So for next steps in communication, I think one of the primary components of this is communication with residents. So we're hoping to begin initial public messaging regarding this comprehensive rate review through introduction information within the July bill stuffers and create a dedicated and engaged Comox Valley webpage for residents to review. That'll be in July. In August, we'll be presenting water rate scenarios and to draft a reserve management policies to the BCV Services Committee. In September, we'll be conducting public information sessions detailing rate escalation scenarios. And October, we're anticipating to get the BCV Service Committee approval of a preferred water rate escalation approach and provide a follow-up information within the October bill stuffer. Followed by in November 2023 to incorporate that approved rate escalation into the 2024-2028 financial planning process. That concludes my presentation, but happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any concerns from Director Rice? Director.
Thank you, Chair. I've got quite a few questions that I would like to ask. First of all, I was kind of interested where you mentioned different rates to different sectors. Can you expand on that a little bit, please?
I mean, it's not something we currently, I think, have a split between.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you. Just speak closer to the mic. Thanks.
I'll just bring this closer to me.
Yeah.
We currently have, I believe, commercial and residential rate structure in place currently, and so we'll be kind of expanding on that, I think, and just kind of looking at what are the kind of proposed impacts. I believe we're only sitting at 5% ICI for that service area. So it would be just kind of reevaluating, looking at impacts of and generating scenarios based off of what we're currently seeing through current volumes that are being drawn through those particular services.
Okay. Another question is that I didn't see any options there. We have some situations in area D where we have a single meter that actually services how many residential homes, like a mobile park. What happens typically is that they go into tier 3 billing very, very quickly in the month. And yet, if you were to average out the water use of all of the properties on that single meter, they're actually using well below the 15 cubic meters. So would like to see some options for that because this is senior housing.
Yeah, I think we do something similar for, was it, on some of our other, maybe, Chris?
Thank you through the chair. I think for that one, we'll just thank you for the suggestion. We'll take it away and look at options for how we can potentially address that through the rate review. Yeah.
Some other questions.
Sorry.
Another question that I had is whereabouts will the open houses be?
I can speak to that one. So in the past, we've held open houses for this service area at the fire hall. So it's been a convenient central location with adequate space for the community.
And I'm also interested in if there's an increase in conservation, how will that affect the overall rates?
Yeah, I think I can speak to that. So the idea is that, so with water conservation, people are using less water. We still need to collect a certain amount of reserves. So there might be it would be kind of structuring the parcel tax, or sorry, the frontage tax higher to kind of have increased certainty on collection of reserves.
Okay. Will there be any scenarios where we could see where perhaps maybe having less, in terms of what you can use in a month? So for example, reducing the 15 cubic meters per month, bring it down to something like 10, and then having more people go into tier 1 billing. Would we see any scenarios on that?
We can certainly review that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's definitely the intent, is to review the existing structure and look for opportunities to optimize that. I mean, just one piece is we do get some feedback from certain members of the public who feel that the rate is too high, that they don't regularly meet the minimum volume included within the flat rate. So we do plan to review that and just assess whether we feel that is still the appropriate level.
Okay.
So if we were to lower it, then we'd have to adjust the rate structure to ensure that we still have the required revenue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that, sorry, that is the feedback that I get from a lot of residents, is that, we have a lot of just, single people or 2 people per dwelling. They're not using anywhere close to the, to the 15 cubic meters. So again, when we take a look at conservation versus rates, being able to collect, enough money to pay for the system, I think those things need to be factored into.
Yeah, we fully agree. And, I guess on, it's the method of calculating that flat rate in the past was to look at kind of averages. So in that context, it's a certainty that some people are going to fall below that average. And the other piece is that, that flat rate constitutes, one of our fixed revenue sources for the service. So if the lower emphasis we put on that flat rate, or the lower that rate, the higher the variability of our revenue. And so that's another consideration. We need to make sure that we're covering our fixed costs, and that there's no kind of revenue, mitigate our revenue risk in terms of for the service. So our 2 fixed revenue sources for the service would be the frontage tax and that flat rate component of the conservation rate structure.
Okay. And last question, I'm just interested in the community engagement beyond the what you're going to put in people's billings, will there be any other advertising that I can leverage to make sure that, you know, we're really getting an impact in terms of notifying residents?
Yeah, I think we have a communication plan that we're developing, and we can certainly leverage on some additional kind of advertising.
Okay. I just find that when we get into public engagement, if we don't hit all of the check boxes in terms of getting the message out there, quite often it's missed. You know, people take a look at their bill and sure, they might take a look at, you know, whatever you include, but then it gets tossed in the garbage. So it's just, you know, a way that I can keep after people to say, hey, this is coming up. You know, if you want to say in it, get out there and do this.
Yeah, for sure. So as Kaylee mentioned, we do have a communications plan drafted, and it does include some print, radio, social media. So we can definitely work with you to leverage that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chair. That's all the questions that I had.
That was a long version of 2 questions. Okay, so I hear that we have certain multiple connections to 1 meter. Is that true of the wheel estates on Regent Road as well? Are they all metered separately, or are they all the trailer park there, or is it all just off 1 meter? And if it is 1 meter, is that not commercial use, or is that because we have a flat rate, right, for commercial rate per cubic meter? So is that not on the commercial rate, not the residential? If it's, that's the first question.
Yeah, I believe this service area does not have a multifamily rate in the same way that say 305, the Comox Valley Water Local Service Area does. So in which case, the commercial rate is used in certain cases for multiple unit properties like the one you're referencing.
And the other thing was around campsites. We know that the big holdup of the conversion of the Watuco system is the intransigence around paying the cost, community cost charges, the DCCs with a C, for every campsite. Is that also going to apply? The DCC is going to apply to the potential campsite up at the Saratoga Speedway? Are they going to be paying for every campsite individually as well?
So we have, so I believe we have that amendment to the CICC for the campsite kind of on hold right now. So I think it was brought through for 2nd, 3rd reading. So once that's in place, or if that's in place at that time, then that would apply to that development.
So the campsite will be paying for every camp, or every campground,
as long as we complete that process and finalize the implementation of that amendment to the CICC bylaw.
Otherwise, it would be, very unfair.
It'd be a missed opportunity.
To be favoring one over the other.
Yeah.
So parcel tax, utilities versus borrowing. So the only thing that's missing out of there is grants. We seem to have a director somewhere to the south of us that is extremely able to get federal grants for almost everything. So is there not something we can be doing actively, proactively for grant funding for the system?
I mean, the service has also attracted some grant funding. We had the roughly 3/4 of the last production well funded from grants. We have been looking for grants for the new production well project, and weren't as successful on that one. As Kaylee mentioned, we will be making some assumptions on the level of grants that we're likely to attract to the service over the years to help fund these infrastructure liabilities. But for the most part, these projects are still some ways out. We're looking at the 15 to 20 year horizon. So those are very much future opportunities rather than current ones.
So at least it's far enough out that, you know, we don't, right now, we're on a emergency only kind of a plan where we're going to fix things as they fail. And I think the other director, Rice, brought a good point up around where the tier 2 kicks in, that level where it kicks in. So people are using far below. And you did make the point that much like your telephone line, there's a certain fixed cost, right? That has to be paid regarding if you didn't use a drop of water. It's still a fixed cost.
Yeah.
But maybe there'd be some incentive there. And the other thing I think we're going to discuss tomorrow at the Comox Valley Water Committee is around a conservation. Obviously, Courtney's not metered, and they use 25% more water than Comox does per capita right now. But those big spikes that we get in the summer are all non-potable use of potable water. In other words, they're used for lawns and whatever. So I think that's a big piece of the education piece. Always, we've been doing it for how many years now? 14 years that I've been here, trying to impress upon people that your lawn really doesn't need that much water or whatever. Brown is beautiful in extreme conditions. So I think that needs to be brought up as well. So the huge spike in the summer, I mean, that's when the rubber hits the road all the time, right? So people have to realize that is highly treated potable water when, was it like 25% of it is flushed down the toilet anyway? So, you know, more frugal use of water is what we're used to doing in the country anyway. I mean, I'm on a well right now. My wife is yelling at me every time I let the tap run into the shave or something. So, okay, that's very interesting. Any other questions from Director Rice? Well, then I thank you both very, very much for this informative presentation, and I'm hoping we can keep moving forward. One little anecdote, though. I'm at the risk of sounding like the former Director C. Director. We did a thing, if you remember back in the day, with the Kellen Reservoir, and we had, I think we were $200,000 short of building it. And the suggestion was, and this was about 2014, was to borrow money to do it. Now the interest rates are pretty low then, and the cost of materials was quite low. And we opted instead, we said, no, it only takes us 2 years to save that up out of reserves. Well, by the time we saved it up out of reserves, the American dollar had gotten stronger, steel had gotten more expensive, and we ended up having to spend that reserve and still borrow the $200,000. So there is our conundrum, right? You got to balance that all out. Nobody has a crystal ball. We do know that inflation is eating up savings like mad right now. So, I mean, saving money is almost a fool's game. So I am in favor of punting it ahead to the generations next that will be using it in some regard. You know, so we have to find a sweet balance there. I see I triggered another question. Director.
No, I don't have a question. Sorry.
Oh.
Okay.
You're going to say, call the question, Gree, were you? Okay, I'm finished. Okay, so that brings us to the point where we will call the question on receipt. All in favor of receipt? That carries. And there is a recommendation attached. Oop, direct. This thing's giving me a hard time. There you go.
Move recommendation.
And seconded. All in favor? That also carries. Thanks everyone for participating in this very riveting and exciting Black Creek Oyster Bay Services Committee. Call for adjournment. Seconded. We are adjourned. No, we're actually terminated. Thank you.